Welcome everyone. This is a non-tech introduction to cryptocurrency. I am Jekyll. I've been with... yeah, come on in. Take a seat. Yeah, just starting. I've been with Green Park for a fairly short period of time, but I've had a good time. I've been interested in cryptocurrency since sort of last year, and I started sort of reading more about it, and the more I read, the more I was interested. And I recently set up my own business that's to do with developing autonomous trading algorithms for dedicated for cryptocurrencies. And this is what I'm doing actually here in Green Park. My background, surprisingly, is in IT, is mechanical engineering. Some admin stuff to start with. There's going to be part 2 of this, so there's 2 parts. This one is non-tech, layman terms, very simple. There's going to be part 2, which is going to be more technical, a bit more in detail for anyone who would like to know a bit more than we're going to find out today. And there's going to be, I'll be sending out, I can send a deck of these slides to anyone who wants them. So please drop me an email if you want either be updated about the part 2 or want the deck of those slides. I'm happy to send those to you. There's going to be my email address at the end again, so you'll be able to write it down. I'm recording it, and I'm going to be uploading the video online, so I was hoping to advertise Grow a bit, take that opportunity. So Grow Up Green Park is a community-focused co-working space. We are in Reading, UK, so if you have a business idea, or if you have a business or a business idea, feel free to come and see us, check us out. This website's just there. We got plenty of space here. I'm sure we'll be able to accommodate you. And ask me questions during my presentations. There's going to be sort of Q&A at the end, but feel free to ask me questions at any time. Content. So what we're going to be going through today. What is money? So I'm hoping to give you a bit of background and context on why Bitcoin was created and what problems it solves. And to do that, I'm going to sort of briefly talk about what money actually is and maybe some of the misconceptions about what it is or what it isn't. Then in simple words, what is Bitcoin? Who issues it and who has control over its supply? And then again, in simple terms, what is Bitcoin mining? You might have heard of it. Use cases for Bitcoin, practical advice on using Bitcoin. There's still some challenges, so I'm just going to briefly mention those. And what other cryptocurrencies are there? There are obviously plenty. Advantages, at the end, just a summary, advantages and disadvantages of Bitcoin over legacy systems, conclusion and references. So let's start asking some questions. What is money? Well, according to International Monetary Fund, money should have the following properties. 3 basic ones: medium of exchange, unit of account, and store of value. Moreover, it should be portable, durable, divisible, and fungible. Fungible is a fancy term for interchangeable, which means £1 in my pocket is the same as £1 in your pocket, basically. So we would have thought that dollars, for example, is a good example of money. But let's think about it in those terms. It is portable, it is somewhat durable, it is divisible, it is fungible, it is a medium of exchange, and it is a unit of account because it's got digits on it, but it's a very poor store of value. So according to IMF's own definition of money, US dollar is not money, and the same goes for any other currency like sterling or euro. So what is your US dollar then? You ask me. It's a currency, and that is a critical difference between what currency is and what money is. Money has all of those properties, including store of value. Currency can be as good as money if it's backed by money, if it's backed by something like gold, something that has this property of store of value. But as it is now, and it's been since 1971, dollar or any other currency that we're using nowadays, conventional currency, isn't backed by anything intrinsic. It's just it's called fiat, which means government says it's money, so it is. But there's nothing intrinsic behind it. But the intrinsic part is not necessarily an issue, because we'll see later Bitcoin also hasn't got any intrinsic value behind it. This is not an issue, but so it's not necessarily to be money, basically, that intrinsic property. So gold can be a good money, but some other means also can be good money, not necessarily having intrinsic value. So this is why dollar is a poor store of value, because in a century it lost about 95% of its purchasing power, basically. And this is true for sterling, euro, yuan, pick your own currency. The graphs obviously are going to be different, but generally they all tend to zero. This is why this happens. It's basically a supply of US dollar. The graph shows supply of US dollar, and basically this is where the huge drop in the value over time comes. It comes from basically irresponsible injections of capital into the monetary system. And you see there, notice 2008 and 9, QE stands for quantitative easing. It's just a fancy term for basically printing more money, or in more modern terms, typing digits into a computer. So it's basically an irresponsible way of saving economy. And we've had those QE 1, 2, 3 rounds. You see massive drop in supply of US dollar. Basically what that does to the economy, it dilutes the currency that everyone else uses. So it gives those who sort of are at the top, close to the source, gives them spending power at the cost of those who are on the bottom. And obviously often those at the bottom are not even aware of it, very often. So in summary, problems with current money. World's de facto reserve currency supply, US dollar, is controlled by an independent agency whose ultimate beneficiaries aren't publicly disclosed, and I'm talking about Federal Reserve here. They consider themselves beyond the government of the USA. And I got an interesting video to back this up. Hopefully it loads.
It's kind of privately owned.
Today, the Federal Reserve is the most powerful entity in the United States, and they're not ashamed to admit it either. Here's former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan.
What should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. What the relationships are don't frankly matter.
In addition to...
Right, so it's quite a audacious statement, isn't it, to say it doesn't really matter what the relations are between the President of the United States and the Fed because we're more powerful. Basically, that's what he said. And they get away with it. So the other problem is inflation. Some call it hidden wealth extraction scheme. I'm not going to dwell into what that means. There's going to be some good references at the end. One of them is the video that I just showed you. The whole video is 20 minutes. It very well explains what that statement means. Censorship and ownership. So there's obviously a problem with ownership of money because we don't really own the money that we have. We only own it. We only own it as long as bank sort of let us own it, and they can censor some of the transactions if they don't like them. and so on. So it's never truly ours if somebody can have their say in how we spend it. And the prime example of this, Greece, a few years back, they were allowed only like 50 euros a week or something, or a day, from the ATMs when there was a crisis. So obviously the money wasn't really theirs, was it, if somebody could restrict how much they can take. Counterfeit is very easy with conventional money, and cost and time required to move money is also very big. I got two of my personal favourites, quotes about monetary system, and again, I'm not going to explain what they actually truly mean, because it would take time to explain that, but there's going to be some good references at the end, so if you want to understand more about it, feel free to go there, and I'm sure you'll have more understanding. If there were no debts in our monetary system, there wouldn't be any money. So this is a very interesting statement. No debts, no money. So generally is implying that economies or money is backed by debt. Marina Eccles, chairman of the Fed, former chairman of the Fed. And Henry Ford said, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." And that's also a very interesting statement, and the more you understand about monetary system and banking, the more you understand what Mr. Ford was thinking about. What is Bitcoin then? So it's a name of payment system like PayPal or Visa, but unlike PayPal or Visa, Bitcoin has this native currency, also called Bitcoin, which is completely independent of modern financial institutions. Bitcoin allows users to send or receive any amount of value to or from anywhere on the planet within seconds, virtually for free, as easy as sending text or email. This is a very powerful statement that none of the conventional currencies, it couldn't be made about none of the conventional currencies, basically. It's open source. The code that runs Bitcoin, the entire network, is up online. Everyone can review it. It's decentralized, so there's no central authority that runs Bitcoin. Basically, it runs on thousands of computers, and if you shut even most of them, as long as there's even one left, it can still function. So basically, the only way to shut Bitcoin is to shut all of them at once, or shut internet. That pretty much means you need to turn off internet. So it's trustless and peer-to-peer. There's no intermediary that you need to trust when you're making a Bitcoin transaction. You sending value directly from yourself to somebody, and there's no one in the middle. There's no escrow fund or anything like that. You just send it directly. Censorship resistant, so that means that you truly own your money. No one can tell you what you are allowed or not allowed to do with it. So obviously that also includes illegal transactions, which is why Bitcoin's been used for Silk Road and stuff like that. But it sort of highlights the fact how that it's censorship resistant. No one, even governments, don't have power to censor any transactions basically on the net that happen on the network. Borderless, so Bitcoin doesn't recognize borders like internet. Immutable, once something happens on Bitcoin network, it cannot be undone. So transactions cannot be reversed, for example. It is completely, well, it is transparent. It's referred to as, semi-autonomous. And what that means, Bitcoin is a very transparent network. You can see all the transactions that are happening online. You can see, actually, you can look into the ledger back to the origin of Bitcoin, back to 2009, and look into every transaction that ever happened on the network. Anyone can do this, no subscription fees or anything like that. You can just go online, it's there. You can see where the money sort of came from, where it went to. You can trace its sort of origin. You can see the amounts. You can see how much money there is in every wallet. One thing that you cannot see is who those wallets belong to. So this is what makes it semi-anonymous. So it's very transparent, but you cannot see who those people are that are operating those wallets. So those are basically just a bunch of addresses, like sending sort of bank numbers across. And it's open to everyone. Your 13-year-old daughter could use it, or somebody that without ID, somewhere in, I don't know, in third world countries could use it. It's completely open to everyone. So who issues Bitcoin? There will ever only be 21 million Bitcoins, and the issuance happens automatically according to schedule designed and implemented by its inventor, Satoshi Nakamoto. This guy is still anonymous. This is just a fake name. No one really knows who invented Bitcoin. No one really claimed. Well, there were people who were claiming that they invented it, but no one really proved that they invented Bitcoin, and there was a very easy way to prove you've invented it. And no one, including the inventor, has the power to override these rules of issuance. And the issuance happens according to this schedule, and the schedule is as follows. There was 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes to start with for the first 4 years, in the form of miners reward. We'll talk about mining in a second. And that amount halves every 4 years. So now there was 25 for 4 years. Now we're at 12.5 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. And those Bitcoins, they are injected into the system through miners. So miners get paid Bitcoin for doing their work, basically. So they get the newly created Bitcoins for their effort. And yeah, we'll talk about mining in a second.
So maybe when you talk about mining, will you explain the point you've got across the bottom there, how they've been irrecoverably lost?
Yeah, I can talk about that. Yeah. So there's been 17 million Bitcoin has been mined recently. We're going to reach 18 million in 2019, 19 million in 2022, 20 million in 2026, and theoretically 21 million in 2133. In truth, we are never going to get to that number because of the some miners have been playing with code and not always claiming the full sort of say 50 Bitcoins per their mining operations, because they're just playing with code. At the time when Bitcoin was worth less, that 50 Bitcoins didn't mean anything really. So they're just playing with code. So that's how they lost the opportunity to claim it, and that opportunity cannot be. You'll never get this opportunity again to claim those lost Bitcoins. So basically, if they're lost, they're lost forever. In addition to that, there is millions of Bitcoins that have been mined, but they've been lost irrecoverably due to either mistakes or people losing access to their wallets, because at the time when Bitcoin wasn't worth anything, people didn't care. They had 1,000 Bitcoins on their disk drive. They binned the disk drive and they didn't bother to save them, obviously, and they lost access to it. That means the Bitcoins are there, but it's like they are on an account, but they've lost password to that account, so they cannot get them, and nobody gets them. They're just lost forever. So actually, in circulation, there is, I think it's estimated like a couple of million Bitcoins are already out of circulation due to mistakes and things like that. So even though we have now 17 million in theory, in practice we probably have about, I don't know, 14 or 15 or even less. So mining, this is a mining facility basically. A lot of computers and internet cables and power cables, that's all it is. Mining is an activity of operating the network through contributing computational resource. So we see computational resource there, it's connected, all of them are connected to the Bitcoin network, and they are churning transactions. Everyone is free to participate in that process, though it's difficult these days to make it profitable because of their sort of competition in the mining industry or Bitcoin mining industry. It's called mining because new Bitcoins are created in the process. Miners are the people who contribute their computing power, and those computers are also called miners, just to clarify. All miners do is processing transactions and making sure no illegitimate transaction makes its way into the immutable ledger. And they're rewarded Bitcoin for their effort. Some use cases, Bitcoin, this is a very important one, money for the unbanked. 2 billion worldwide as of 2014, according to World Bank's Global Financial Inclusion Database, doesn't have access to banking. Oftentimes those people also don't have access to internet, but that might be a problem now, but it's not going to be a problem forever. There's going to be sort of satellite internet very soon, and sort of there's not going to be a place on Earth without access to internet. So it can potentially solve a problem for 2 billion people to have a bank account in their pocket. Cross-border payments, it's a big advantage over conventional payments. Bitcoin doesn't recognize borders, so you can send money as easily and as cheaply to someone, from me to Gareth, or from me to Australia. It's as cheap and as fast. It's a good store of value, so it can be used as such. For example, instead of gold, although this is a bit controversial for now with all the price volatility. Internet shopping checkout option, that's the very sort of easy and obvious option. So you'd have, your PayPal checkout option, Apple Pay, and Pay, Bitcoin Pay, that you actually already have in some stores on. Everywhere where cash is used, arguably Bitcoin can be used instead more efficiently as long as there's internet. So things like street markets, car boot sales, tips and donations for bartenders, street artists, etc. And Gareth here actually uses Bitcoin for his business, so I was hoping he could share some of his experiences. What do you think? How has it been for you?
Well, now the volatility's not over, but it's changed. It makes things an awful lot easier. But yes, one of my businesses exclusively uses Bitcoin for receiving payments. So the ability to run everything without having to have permission from anybody. I don't have to have a bank account, I don't have to do any ID or waiting periods or anything like that. I can just spin up a server, configure it all, and then I can make and receive payments from anybody all over the world. I don't have to worry about escrow, like say, or set per payment, set per fees or bank fees, or having to pay a business bank account rates, anything like that. Because it's all connected to the internet, it's all program driven, it's all open source. I can integrate my software directly with the Bitcoin network, or Monero and the other ones. And it gives me the ability to offer anonymous transactions to people. So the business in question is empowering anonymity on the internet. So it'd be a bit silly for me to offer a product that allows internet anonymity and expect someone to hand over ID or a Visa credit card number or something like that. So yeah, it's really good for all of the reasons we put here, apart from the price volatility side of things. So when I first started writing the software, I only checked how much a pound was worth every half hour or so. But when at the tail end of last year, a Bitcoin could change thousands of pounds worth of value in an hour or half an hour, anything like that. So I might say to someone, "Oh, can you pay me 0.001 Bitcoin?" And half an hour ago that was £100. Now it's £500. Obviously, no one wants to suddenly be out of pocket that much money. So there was some not opposition. People weren't wanting to use it as much. They just wanted to buy into it and hold on to it for it to go up in price rather than actually spend it. But now things have calmed down. People are going back to using it again for just normal transactions that you would use cash for.
Hey, great, thank you. What are the risks of using Bitcoin then? And this is paramount. Your private key, I haven't talked about what private key is because it's going to be part of the more technical presentation. But anyway, your private key or your backup phrase, and I'm going to mention backup phrase a bit later, is everything anyone needs to steal bitcoins from you. So never reveal them to anyone, not even your spouse, if you're considering it. What that tells you is that there is a single point of access to your money. So if somebody finds out that point of access, they can steal your money and you wouldn't even know who that was and you wouldn't be able to get it back, basically. So there's certain things that you need to be very aware of and careful when you're dealing with bitcoins. And this is this point I just mentioned. If they were stolen, it is practically impossible to trace the thief or otherwise recover the funds. And bitcoins are lost forever if you send them to wrong address. If you're scanning QR codes, that's fine. But if you're like typing it into your phone, then you may make a mistake, and it's probably not a good idea. And then once you send them, you've lost them forever.
Just as a question, so if someone received Bitcoin erroneously and knew that they'd received it erroneously, can they return it to the person who sent it to them erroneously?
They can return, yeah. So they know who they received them from, and they can return. But bear in mind,
transaction.
Sorry.
By making
another transaction, exactly. They can just send it back. That's true. But bear in mind that if you're making a mistake, it is technically, it's theoretically possible, practically impossible to make such a mistake that you actually send to someone else. Because the pool of addresses is so vast that technically you're not going to be able to guess somebody else's address. Not even guess. If we have like trillion of addresses already in use, technically it's impossible to guess even one of those addresses.
So there isn't a store of there isn't something that stores the address that you typed in, the address you typed in correctly. You know how you
ask
type
again,
in,
sorry?
So now you type in a password and it retains a password,
Right, yeah.
like autocomplete.
Yeah.
So
You can, yes. You can store addresses in wallets. Some wallets have that functionality to store addresses and name them. So address is just a bunch of digits where you can name them, Simon and Wojciech, and just reuse that. The easiest way is to scan a QR code. So a Bitcoin address can be displayed in the form of a QR code. You can just scan it with your phone and then send to that address. And it's easy and sort of impossible to go wrong with that.
To ask a kind of slightly peripheral question, which is, so what would happen if you sent a transaction to an account that doesn't exist? It's not bounced back. It's
right. There is no such thing as non-existing account in Bitcoin.
So it invents a new account.
So you basically at that point invent a new account, and that account exists, but nobody has password to that account, basically. So that's how it works. So that's what it means, they're lost forever. Because if you send it to wrong address, you're kind of inventing that account. And you can actually see it on the blockchain, so the Bitcoin Explorer. So when you go online, you can see where that money is. You can see it there, but no one has access to move it from there because no one has password to that account.
Does that happen often?
It happens, yeah. So that's why you need to be careful where you're sending your money. That's why it's always best practice to just use QR code or copy paste. Generally, yeah. And again, they're lost forever if you lose access to your wallet and don't know the backup phrase. So if you haven't backed up your wallet which is on your phone, and you drown your phone, you have a big problem because there's no Bitcoin company that you can complain to. You basically lost your money, and it's out of circulation at that point, pretty much. And watch out for scams. It's a good one, I think. Cryptocurrency is a commons paradise, and it actually is for a few reasons. It's based on the internet. It's semi-anonymous, and it's new. People don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of coverage in media. People just flock into it without really thinking twice, and they get burned. and they get burned hard sometimes. So you need to be careful. If something looks too good, it's probably not good at all. And the prime example of this recently, BitConnect, there was a company that was accepting, I think they were accepting bitcoins to make loans or something, but basically they were a Ponzi scheme. And at the point when they shut down their services, I think their coin was worth about $400 a coin, and it plummeted down to zero in like less than an hour, because they shut down operations, and basically it turned out to be a scam, although people were warning about it for a long time. So we need to be careful. This comment was more to do with generally cryptocurrencies, not necessarily Bitcoin itself. So there's so many different cryptocurrency projects, and you need to be careful which ones you're sort of trusting or using. So practical advice: how can I start using Bitcoin? There's abundance of wallets of all forms and flavors for Android and iOS. These three I use personally. This one stores Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. I'll talk about Bitcoin Cash in a second. The other two, Jax and Coinomi, they are multi-coin wallets, so they can store many other coins, not just Bitcoin. As soon as you install any of those apps, back up, and you will get prompted for this, but do back up and set up spending pin. Backup basically means that once you back it up, which means you basically receive like a recovery phrase. And with that phrase, you can always recover your funds. If you drown your phone or whatever happens to your phone, you can always recover them. Even if Jax goes down or Coinomi goes down, you can recover it with different wallet provider.
So seeing you've got some iOS examples here, are your PIN and your passphrase stored in keychain, as an example?
Sorry?
Would your PIN and your passphrase be stored in iOS's keychain? Does that help with that recovery process, or is it?
I'm not sure. I don't use iPhone keychain. Not sure how that works.
Okay, it's like a password manager.
Okay, I'm not sure. Really.
Passphrase is a cryptographic seed that informs the private key that we mentioned earlier, that then informs the public addresses. So it's not actually a password in the traditional thing. Mm-hmm. Think of it as a way of representing a really long series of numbers that then sets the cryptographic primitives for the wallet's address. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a way of informing the wallet what your addresses would be, mm-hmm. than an actual password that iPhone would be aware of to be able to store.
But iPhone wouldn't care. Keychain would just treat it as a password.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question is as to whether it hooks into the keychain system, the API.
Keychain might be risky because you probably have to one password. You unlock it quite often.
Does it?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on which one you've got. So.
But is the passphrase a human readable phrase, or is it again a bunch of?
It is. It's usually 12 words. It's an array of 12 words that you can write down on a piece of paper, and it's just normal words like cat or mouse. So that one is human readable.
Yeah, the process presumably is it generates a sequence of words, it uses that to seed
exactly
an account number. So using that same process, you can always follow that route.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I like the way we're going back to writing it down on a piece of paper.
Unfortunately,
yeah. But can you supply like custom ones? My favorite paragraph of some poem.
Wallets don't offer that option for obvious reason. People would supply some very weak ones. People are not very good random number generators or random word generators. But yes, there is. If you technically tech savvy, you can do it yourself if you want.
But that would be like your custom.
That would be a custom.
Because
but
otherwise, like
the wallets generally don't support this option. Yeah. The spending pin. So it's basically, that means that if someone gets hold of your phone, they need to type the PIN before they are able to send your funds. So if you don't have it, someone takes your phone, sends the Bitcoin to themselves, gives the phone back to you without you being aware of it, and you don't know where they were sent. They just gone from your wallet. So do set up the spending PIN. How to acquire Bitcoin: buy, accept, or mine. I'll talk about buy and accept options. If you're new into this space, mining is not an option for you, basically. It's too competitive these days. And then once you've got them, you can pay for goods and services. Look out for Bitcoin accepted here. Growing number of merchants, though there's still relatively few. So do ask if they accept Bitcoin payments, even if you know they don't. That's the only way to sort of grow this thing into adoption. So how can you acquire Bitcoin? You can buy it, and the easiest way is Coinbase. It's just a phone app or website where you share your card details and you buy them. You buy Bitcoin or other currencies. Disadvantage is there's a price markup because it's not peer-to-peer buying, it's buying from a company, so they increase the price slightly for their profit. And you need to be aware that although they offer you something that mimics Bitcoin wallet, you need to send the funds from their wallet to your personal wallet, because the difference is if you hold it on their wallet, if they go down for some reason, you've lost there's no way you can recover without them your funds. Whereas if your personal wallet provider goes down, you can always recover it with somebody else because you know the private key, because you know the backup phrase. With them, they store your private key for you, so you need to be aware of that.
What's their markup?
I think about. No, I'm not sure actually. No, I don't know. Order of few percent, I think, 2 or 3% maybe, or maybe more. I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well, presumably it's fixed in Bitcoin, so it wouldn't necessarily.
Sorry.
But it might not necessarily be a simple percentage. It would scale, so presumably it gets you the rates with larger transfers.
I'm not sure. I haven't really used Coinbase myself, actually.
It does, actually. I think it's just 1.5% or something.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there a risk to buying and owning Bitcoin? That volatility is, say, is quite stable now. It's not likely to.
It's not stable.
It's not.
Yeah. And it won't be until you see people paying with Bitcoin everywhere.
Yeah.
It won't be stable.
So it's still a risk.
And until you go to for your food market and you can pay with Bitcoin, or you go to a grocery store, you can pay with Bitcoin. Until then, it's not going to be stable.
The trouble is that you're thinking of it as an asset class, but if it's money, then what actually happens is the value of Bitcoin remains constant.
Yeah.
Right? So 1 Bitcoin has always been worth 1 Bitcoin. The difference is the value of stuff as measured in that is what is changing.
True.
Similar to gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But because there is limited supply, it's scarce. That means the more people want it, the more it costs. So basically, supply and demand.
So that's the more people
economics
want to hold it, the more it costs. Because
sorry.
The more people who want to hold it, the more it costs. As a medium of exchange, it should be relatively independent of the number in existence, depending on the velocity of the currency.
Yeah, true. Like basically, less Bitcoin there is in circulation, the more it will, and if that's coupled with more people wanting it, then more it will cost. So if somebody holds Bitcoin without selling them something, that means that they take it out of circulation, doesn't it, effectively?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much that's what you said.
But isn't that limited number of Bitcoins that can exist negated by the fact that someone can just come along and invent another cryptocurrency?
It kind of is. Like, the cryptocurrencies compete with each other, and I'll get to that point at the end, how they are. different, how they all compete within one sort of ecosystem, and they kind of compete for the same money, isn't it? Because they compete for the money of the people who want to invest in cryptocurrency, but there's so many, they might like Bitcoin, but they might want something else.
Invest in the wrong one.
Or the wrong one. So in a way, they do compete for the market share of the entire market cap of the cryptocurrency
So
ecosystem.
the more valuable Bitcoin or any of the others become, the more incentive there is for someone to start another cryptocurrency, which then drags down the value of the existing ones.
When you'd thought different to now.
Yeah, it's a complicated
Supply and demand
relationship
would
there.
tend to suggest that.
They've all got different features as well, which can change.
But there needn't be. You could invent a new Bitcoin that's called Bitcoin Plus. That's got exactly the same features of Bitcoins. As you were saying, that would then dilute the available investment funds.
But isn't the value somehow tied to the adoption?
Yeah, sure.
So even if you create it in Bitcoin 10 years ahead, you still have a lot of work to do to get
Yeah, well, that
You've
you've
also
got to be
got
successful.
hundreds of millions of pounds worth of the computing resource allocated to Bitcoin. So to compete, you need the equivalent computing resource.
Presumably the mining rigs can be reconfigured very simply to...
If it follows the script or ASIC stuff, yeah. But if they're different, then...
And I'm sure it's going to become more efficient as we put more emphasis into silicon and can really do this more efficiently.
I mean, basically, what stops Bitcoin becoming the MySpace of the cryptocurrency world?
Yeah, that's the trouble.
This has been really, I've got to go, I'm afraid, but I'll keep you in contact with you.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for this.
Okay, let's carry on then. The other way to buy is exchanges. Large volumes, good price, a bit more hurdles. You have to provide your ID, proof of your source of funds sometimes, but generally there's no price markup, peer-to-peer buying, so it's cheaper. And I've used that personally.
Which exchanges do you use?
I use a couple of Polish ones, and GDATs, Kraken as well. The Polish ones are BitBay and BitMarket. Bitcoin ATMs, so basically there's tons of them in London. There's the website for that if you want to find one. You basically put your money, either card or cash, and it spits out a receipt, and you scan that receipt and you get the transfer to your wallet.
Just hold on, what's their markup?
Sorry?
What is the Bitcoin ATM?
There's probably markup as well, maybe even more than Coinbase.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Their fees, they've got fees and then they've got their exchange rates on rate, but they are truly anonymous for less than 500 quid each ATM. So the ATMs themselves is not like a global thing. There's about 4 or 5 brands, isn't there?
I'm not sure,
but the person that physically owns the
Okay.
ATM in their building can also set fees, because they've got to power it and give it some space on the floor and stuff.
So it's more like a franchise model.
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
So like Satoshi points and stuff like that.
And so you put in like pound coins up to 5 quid.
Well, notes. But yeah, you can, without having to give any ID. But you can do that multiple times.
Okay.
So you just do like 5 lots of 500 quid, never give any ID.
I remember Pokemon games you were doing.
So once you got Bitcoins, you can start accepting them just directly to your wallet, or you can use third-party payments facilitator like BigPay, where basically they just give you a checkout option.
But then there's no option now to really get Bitcoin anonymously. Yeah? You can then always, if I buy it on exchange or on Coinbase, it will require ID and
We just discussed the ATM.
You need the ATMs, or
Find the fancy code.
yeah, or you can do, if you look at localbitcoins.com.
Exactly, you can do over-the-counter kind of thing. So find someone who wants to sell and deal directly with them. There's websites to connect people who want to buy or sell.
You physically meet up somewhere in the middle between the two of you.
So then
In the old-fashioned way.
how do you know who the hell these people are?
You don't.
You just meet, yeah, but you don't know that they're actually going to give you your Bitcoin in return for your...
You're sat there with them.
You meet them actually.
Yeah, you physically meet them.
And exchange sort of money for Bitcoin. So
But that's the beauty of Bitcoin, in that once a transaction has come through, once you're sitting in the field with 5G, and you see the transaction as being present on your wallet, because you're not anyone over eavesdropping on the transaction, you absolutely, definitely know that that transaction has occurred.
Yeah, once it's been committed to a block.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if you've got a suitcase full of cash, you don't know that that's not cash there, or newspaper underneath.
Yeah, they're the one taking all the risk, because you might be giving them counterfeit notes. Whereas once the Bitcoin transaction appears on the Bitcoin network, they can't take it back. So for buying Bitcoin, it's actually much safer. Well, yeah, then you obviously
because the money leaves your account
no,
prior to the.
No, if you want to be anonymous, you wouldn't use
take cash.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of this argument. Is very important.
I'm looking generically across it.
Cold hard cash.
Challenges. Just time conscious. That's actually.
I'm going to need to shoot, but it's really interesting. So
there's going to be video online, so
yeah,
you can follow this online.
Yes.
So current energy consumption of the entire Bitcoin network is comparable to that of Czech Republic or Switzerland. Imagine that. That's obviously that's not acceptable. That has to change, and people are aware of it. The community is aware of it. They're working on it, but at the moment, as it is, that's the consumption. Scalability is still an issue. Bitcoin has a technical limitation to how much it can scale, and there is a lot of effort being put into scaling, making Bitcoin scale, basically. But as it is now, it is limited. I'll stop here with that scalability debate. I don't want to go in deeper into it. And from there, hopefully, worldwide adoption in commerce. That's a challenge as well. Legislation, taxation, as of today, is a mess. And anyone who's used it and done any accountancy on it or anything like that, start looking into capital gains tax and all those things, it's a mess. And there's no clear guidance from either HMRC or any other jurisdiction.
So you you maybe work like billions or millions and no one knows, and you don't pay any taxes on it. So
yes, but then when you spend this money, like where do you have it from? You don't have a proof.
Yeah, exactly. That's
But generally, yes, nobody would know that you have it because of this semi-anonymous feature. But then if you want to spend that money, obviously you need to prove that you made it somehow and pay your tax.
So people pay taxes on Bitcoins?
Yeah. And IRS and states and HMRC, I'm not sure actually about HMRC, but they do chase people for, because for example they notice on Coinbase there's people bought enormous amounts of Bitcoin, and IRS figured like, hey, we've only had people reporting Bitcoin profits of very small amounts compared to what there should be, because obviously there was a huge spike last year, like, you know, people 10x or 100x their money within a year because of their huge price spike. And IRS didn't have any profit out of that, so they started, you know, being curious, where's that money? Ability to expand and contract money supply is arguably needed to assist ever-changing economies, and so this is to say banks aren't inherently bad. There's purpose for banks. They should sort of assist economies with their power to expand and contract monetary supply in order to maintain stable currency. This is one of the key purposes of central banks. This is what they should be doing. But the problem is obviously with irresponsible use of their power. So, and Bitcoin doesn't offer that option of controlling supply or expanding and contracting supply of this coin. So that means that there's still going to be problems with volatility. Together with sort of changing economy. what other cryptocurrencies are there? Bitcoin Cash. What is the difference between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin? Just without going too deep into their political sort of differences, there was this scaling debate which I was talking to you about, and the people community couldn't come to terms on how this can scale. They had different ideas, so they split into two different coins at one point. And we have Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash since August last year. So basically, it's a group of people that disagreed with sort of with the Bitcoin scalability plan. What you need to know as user, what the consequence of this is, as it is now, Bitcoin is somewhat irreliable in terms of fees. And we've seen that in December and January last year when the usage spiked significantly due to all the media coverage. The network was stress tested, and I'm not going to go into technical detail why that happened, but basically that drove the prices of the transactions significantly up. So just to give you an idea, sometimes you had to pay between even up to $100 for a single transaction, which is not too bad if you're a sheikh and you're making sort of settling $1 million oil transaction. But if you're buying a cup of coffee, that's obviously unacceptable. Bitcoin Cash, on the other hand, they have different scaling plan. There's obviously merits to both plans, but the consequence of the plan that Bitcoin Cash has and the commitment of them is that will never happen, that the transactions will always remain low, which means penny or a couple of pennies, or sometimes even sub-penny cost transactions. So to me, Bitcoin Cash is more reliable because I don't rely on the sudden spikes of usage of the Bitcoin network in general. Ethereum, smart contracts, other concept, more features. Again, no time to go into detail of what smart contracts are, unfortunately. Dash, decentralized autonomous organization plus optional privacy, also very interesting concept. Very innovative. Monero, built-in privacy. So I told you in Bitcoin there is sort of there's this transparency. In Monero, everything is obfuscated. There's completely no transparency there. It's completely private. Nobody knows where the transactions nobody can trace transactions on Monero network basically to anywhere. And 1,000 plus more cryptocurrencies and tokens. So just quickly, summary advantages. Sorry for the small print. No wealth extraction scheme through inflation. Bitcoin transactions are permissionless, borderless, do not require any ID, are censorship resistant, irreversible, once settled, fast, much cheaper than Visa, online and available 24 hours a day, 365 days per year. Stored bitcoins cannot be printed or debased, have no storage costs, are easy to protect and hide, are in your direct possession. Note those four in the bottom. They are a very desirable properties of a store of value. It would be nice if gold didn't have storage costs or was easy to protect and hide, or that actually holds true for gold. Summary disadvantages: risk of irrecoverable loss of funds, no customer protection or support, built-in deflation, no physical form, volatility, experimental phase still, despite all the hype, not widely accepted still. And those last three, they'll become less of an issue with growing adoption. So actually, those I've only listed four real disadvantages once the system matures. And in conclusion, money has become a product, and let me try and explain what I mean by that. Comparing those coins that I showed you to some of the products you know very well, let's say cars, brands of cars. if you say want,
So to interrupt, the meeting interrupted too.
is it?
Yeah.
Right, so I'll wrap up very quickly. Unfortunately, I'd run out of time there, and I didn't have enough time to expand on my final point, which is money has become a product. And in order to do this, let me come back to the slide where I was showing some of the better known coins out there, and let me try to draw a parallel between what's happening now in cryptocurrency space and, for example, an automotive industry, where different brands of cars are competing for the customers, basically trying to introduce ever more modern, ever more convenient and desirable features in their cars. So, for example, if you want to drive a luxurious car, you probably choose Bentley because this is their targeted sort of user base. If you would like to drive a sporty car, a fast car, you'd probably choose a McLaren or Lotus or Lamborghini. If you want to drive a utility car, you'd probably choose Ford. And then if you look at cryptocurrency space, it's exactly the same. So currencies have different functions, different flavors. There is no one currency that sort of solves all the problems and addresses all the problems, all customers' needs. They all address their own customer bases. And for example, if you want privacy, you probably go for Monero. If you think the centralized autonomous organization is the way forward, you like this idea, plus optional privacy, you would go for Dash. If you think smart contracts if you need smart contracts, you think this is a great idea, you could go for Ethereum. If you just want reliable transactions, you probably go for Bitcoin Cash. If you want a brand, you go for Bitcoin. The big difference is automotive companies are operated for the profit of a handful of the stakeholders, whereas cryptocurrencies were created and are being developed by a collective effort of like-minded communities for other people, and everyone who uses those cryptocurrencies is a stakeholder. You might be saying that, well, we had choice before cryptocurrencies. We could choose between dollar or pound or euro, yuan, all the other currencies that are out there. Yes, you could, but the problem is that the choice between those currencies that we used to have is like choosing between a pizza, burger and fish and chips when you're thirsty. It is a good choice in other circumstances, but at the moment, as it is, it doesn't solve any of your issues. So money has become a product. The difference between money being just a means of exchange which we are imposed to use and money being a product, it's literally like a difference between money being a master and money being a slave. Some of the references I've used to prepare this talk, this presentation, are listed here. Who Controls All of Our Money by Cold Fusion. It's a great 20-odd minute video basically attempting to answer that question and actually explaining it in very well, in a very concise way. Expanding on a bit more about money, a series of I think 8 episodes by Mike Maloney, Hidden Secrets of Money. It's again a great piece of work, very informative about what money is, what its history is, how does it work. A great book by G. Edward Griffin that I honestly think everyone that is using our financial system, so there isn't many people that should read in order to be fully aware of what they are a part of The Creature from Jekyll Island. I really do recommend. It's a sizey book, but I really do recommend going through it. It is very informative as well. So those three positions are just on sort of monetary systems, and there's not much. There isn't anything about Bitcoin here really, apart from the last episode of the Hidden Secrets of Money from Mike Maloney. The other three references are Bitcoin Satoshi white paper, the Bitcoin wiki page, and there is a very good. But basically, this is a reference to a list of references. The last one, there's a plentiful Bitcoin resource on everything, more and less technical. Next presentation will include more technically about blockchain, mining, public key cryptography, transactions, and advanced security measures. Thank you very much. I am Wojciech Rzadkosz. This is my email address. Feel free to drop me an email if you would like to be updated about the next talk, or if you'd like this deck of slides. I'm really happy to share it for you to use it. I think it's for everyone's benefit.